You know, they say a mother's love is unconditional. And for most of my life, I believed that. I believed it meant giving until it hurt, sacrificing until there was nothing left, all for the sake of your children. But yesterday, as I sat in this very chair and listened to my only son's voice crack with panic over the phone, I discovered a new, terrifying kind of love. A love that has to be strong enough to let them drown in the consequences of their own actions. He was at a 5-star restaurant, you see, with his wife and his mother-in-law, and for the first time in a decade, every single one of his credit cards was declined. And as he whispered, "Mom, people are laughing at us," I felt a cold, quiet satisfaction settle in my soul. This is the story of the day the Bank of Mom permanently closed its doors, and how I finally learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to let them fall. To understand the sheer, delicious irony of that moment, I have to take you back to the evening before. The scene was my own living room. I was playing the part I'd perfected over the years, the gracious, generous mother and mother-in-law. I had a coffee pot in my hand, circulating, refilling cups for my daughter-in-law, Dana, and 2 of her sleek, well-dressed friends. The conversation was light, filled with talk of interior design and vacations. And I was, as always, the silent facilitator. The ghost in the machine that made their lovely lives possible. For years, ever since my dear Henry passed, I had slowly, insidiously, become the personal ATM for my son Ryan and his wife. Every whim, every craving, every emergency, that was never really an emergency. It all came from my savings, from the pension I'd worked 40 years to earn. I told myself it was love. I told myself it was what a mother does. But that night, the facade shattered. Dana was holding court, laughing about some story, when one of her friends gestured vaguely in my direction. I was heading towards the kitchen to fetch more cream. Dana didn't even bother to lower her voice. She turned to her friends with a conspiratorial smirk and said, "Oh, that old woman? Don't mind her. She's only good for paying our bills." The words hung in the air, sharp and venomous. And then, the sound that truly broke me, laughter. My son, my Ryan, who I had nursed through fevers and cheered at graduations, burst out laughing. It wasn't a polite chuckle. It was a full-throated, genuine roar of amusement, as if his wife had just delivered the punchline of the century. I froze, the coffee pot feeling suddenly like a lead weight in my hand. I watched them, these beautiful, entitled people, laughing at me in my own home, surrounded by the furniture my husband and I had bought together, standing on the rug we'd saved for. My hands began to tremble, but not from sadness. Oh no, this was something else entirely. This was a cold, purifying rage I had never felt before. Because in that crystal-clear moment, I understood something I had been desperately denying for years. To them, I wasn't a mother. I wasn't a mother-in-law. I wasn't even a person. I was a utility. A resource. A bank account with legs. The laughter wasn't just cruel, it was an admission of truth. And what had that truth cost me? Let me take you on a little tour of the last decade. When Ryan lost his job at that tech startup, who paid his $800 a month rent? For 8 months? That was me. 8 months where he barely lifted a finger to look for real work, because why should he? The Bank of Mom was open for business. When Dana decided she needed to refresh her entire wardrobe because she needed to look professional at her new charity board position, whose credit card took the $3,000 hit. Mine. When they decided they were stressed and deserved a vacation to Hawaii, another $5,000 vanished from my savings account. Did they ever invite me? Of course not. I was good enough to pay not to accompany them. "It's a romantic trip, Mom," Ryan would tell me with a pat on the shoulder whenever I hinted that I'd love to feel the ocean breeze just once. You understand, right? And I, like the fool I was, always understood. I always paid. I always kept quiet while they lived the life I financed. The final straw, the one that should have broken the camel's back but didn't because I was such a willing beast of burden, came just 3 months ago. Dana decided she needed a new car. "The one we have is getting too old, Georgia," she told me in that syrupy, manipulative voice she reserved for big-ticket requests. "Besides, if we're going to have kids soon, we need something safer." The down payment was $15,000. $15,000. That represented 2 years of my careful savings, 2 years of me saying no to myself so I could say yes to them. But I paid it. I always paid it. Because it was for the family. For the phantom grandchildren that were always just on the horizon, a future promise used to justify present greed. But yesterday, after hearing those words, only good for paying our bills, after seeing my son's face contort with laughter at my expense, something in the very foundation of my heart shifted. It didn't break. It hardened into something stronger. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't toss and turn with sadness or self-pity. I lay there in the dark, and a brutal, beautiful clarity burned inside me. I saw the last 10 years of my life with horrifying precision, a relentless cycle of manufactured crises, emotional pressure, and my own weak-kneed capitulation. I saw the thousands of dollars, the countless sacrifices, the lonely Christmases while they were in Aspen with the money I'd given them as a gift. The fog of maternal guilt finally lifted, and I could see the barren, transactional landscape of our relationship for what it was. At 3 o'clock in the morning, I got out of bed. The house was silent, a blank canvas for my rebellion. I went in my study, turned on my computer, and the blue glow illuminated my face, a mask of determined resolve. It was time to make the decisions I should have made a decade ago. First, I logged into every single credit card account. One by one, I canceled the additional cards they had in their possession. 5 cards in total, each one a symbol of my servitude. The clicks of the mouse were like gunshots in the quiet room, each one taking back a piece of my freedom. Then, I moved to the shared savings account. It was an account I had set up for family emergencies, but which had been used for designer handbags, expensive dinners, and spa weekends. I transferred the remaining balance, a little over $2,000, into my private account and closed it forever. I changed all the passwords, I removed their names from every automatic transfer, I built a digital fortress around what was left of my life. By 6 a.m., it was done. The sun was just beginning to lighten the sky. I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, the one I would drink without the acidic churn of anxiety in my stomach, and I sat in my favorite armchair. For the first time in years, I felt a profound, unshakable peace. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of possibility. I knew what was coming. I knew the phone would ring. I knew my son's voice would be on the other end, desperate, humiliated, demanding an explanation. And for the first time, I was ready. I was more than ready. I was looking forward to it. Just imagine the scene. Your child, the one you'd give anything for, is forced to face a room full of staring strangers because you finally said no. The shock, the embarrassment, the utter collapse of their entitled world. That's the moment everything changes. The phone rang at exactly 9:15. I was in the kitchen, enjoying my second coffee of the day, watching the birds at the feeder. I saw Ryan's name flash on the screen. I didn't jump. I didn't feel a pang of guilt. I let it ring 3 times, savoring the power of that simple inaction. When I finally picked up, his voice was a frantic, hysterical whisper. Mom? Mom, why are all the cards declined? I'm here at the Crestview Grill with Dana's mother. We wanted to have lunch and celebrate her birthday, but none of the cards work. It's humiliating. People are staring at us. The waiter is getting impatient, and I don't have enough cash to pay a $200 bill. What's going on? The Crestview Grill. The most expensive restaurant in town, with a waiting list weeks long. The same place they had gone to for their anniversary last year, a meal I had paid for. The same place I had never been invited to, not once. The irony was so perfect it was almost poetic. They were there, surrounded by the polished, judgmental high society they so desperately wanted to impress, and they couldn't even pay for their overpriced salads. Good morning, Ryan, I replied, my voice so calm it surprised even me. The cards are canceled because I've decided I'm no longer going to finance your lifestyle. What? He hissed, his voice dropping even lower. Are you crazy? We're in public. Dana's mother is here. How am I supposed to explain that my own mother left me high and dry? This is ridiculous. What's ridiculous, son, I said, my tone even and cold, was hearing you laugh yesterday when your wife said I was only good for paying your bills. What's ridiculous is realizing that for 10 years I've been treated like an ATM instead of your mother. There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear the muffled sounds of the restaurant in the background, the clink of cutlery, the low hum of conversation. I could picture it perfectly. Dana and her mother sitting there, their smiles growing strained, the waiter hovering nearby with the leather bill folder, other diners beginning to notice the awkward, silent drama unfolding at their table. "Mom, please," Ryan's voice was tight with desperation. "Don't do this now. We can talk later, I promise. But I need you to reactivate the cards. Just for today. I promise." I cut him off, the words sharp and final. "No more promises, Ryan. No more. Just for today?" I've heard that for 10 years. For 10 years, I've been your easy solution for everything. But yesterday, I learned something important. You don't respect me. You don't value me. And you definitely don't love me the way I thought you did. "That's not true," he insisted, his voice rising before he caught himself and lowered it again. "Of course we love you." Dana was just joking. "You know how she is." "I know exactly how she is, Ryan. And I know exactly how you are. That's why I made this decision." I could hear him breathing heavily, short, panicked pants. I imagined him running a hand through his hair, sweating under the collar of his expensive shirt. The situation was escalating. His mother-in-law had definitely noticed something was very wrong. That the platinum card he always flashed so casually was now just a useless piece of plastic. "Mom, please," he begged, his voice cracking. "We can't just sit here. What do you want us to do? Wash dishes? Should we call the police? This is a humiliation." "Now you know how I felt for years," I replied, not a trace of sympathy in my voice. "The difference is, you're 35 years old and should be able to solve your own problems." "Are you sick?" he asked, his tone shifting to one of feigned concern. "Are you feeling okay? This isn't like you, Mom. You've never been this cruel." Cruel. The word hung in the air, a testament to his utter lack of understanding. He thought cutting off his unlimited funds was cruelty. He had no idea what was coming next. The word cruel hit me not like a slap, but like a bucket of ice water. It was so profoundly upside down, so perfectly illustrative of the warped reality they lived in, that it almost took my breath away. "Cruel," I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. "You think this is cruel, Ryan? Let me tell you about cruel." Cruel is a mother working until she's 65, denying herself new glasses or a decent vacation to ensure her son has an inheritance, only to realize he's spending it while she's still alive. Cruel is sitting alone every Christmas, wrapping a $500 check as a gift for your son, knowing he'll use it for a ski trip you're not invited on, while you eat a frozen dinner for one. Cruel was the sound of your laughter in my living room yesterday. You and your wife made it abundantly clear what my only value is to you. And I am simply accepting that assessment and acting accordingly. I heard a commotion in the background. Dana's voice, sharp and questioning, "What is going on, Ryan? Just fix it." Then another, older woman's voice, Claudia's, Dana's mother, murmuring something I couldn't quite catch, but the tone was pure, undiluted annoyance. "Look, Mom," Ryan said, switching tactics, his voice straining to sound reasonable, adult. "I get that you're upset, but this isn't the way to handle it. We can sit down and talk like adults, figure this out. But right now, I need you to help me. Just this one more time, and then we can change things." "I promise." "Just this one more time," I echoed, and a short, bitter laugh escaped my lips. It was a sound I didn't even recognize as my own. Do you have any idea how many one more times I've financed over the past decade? Do you know how many last times there have been? It's a bottomless pit, Ryan. And I'm finally choosing to stop falling into it. "But Mom, no." "No, Ryan," I said, my voice firm, absolute. "Not this time. This time, you're going to have to find another solution. You have jobs. You have friends. You have in-laws who seem to be right there with you. Figure it out." "How are we supposed to explain this to Dana's mother?" he whispered, his voice thick with a humiliation that, I confess, felt like a balm on my wounded soul. "How am I going to face these people who know us? Everyone is going to be talking about this." And there it was. The naked, unvarnished truth. It wasn't about our broken relationship. It wasn't about the pain they had caused me. It wasn't even about the money, not really. It was about his image. His reputation. What people would think of him. It had always been about that. That is your problem to solve, son, I said, a strange sense of liberation washing over me. For years, I have worried about your image, your comfort, your social standing. Now, for the first time, it's time for me to worry about my own. You can't do this. You're my mother. Exactly, I said, the word landing with the weight of a final judgment. I'm your mother, not your employee, not your personal banker, not your financial lifeline. And as your mother, I should have taught you years ago how to stand on your own 2 feet. Consider this a very late, but very necessary lesson. There was another, longer silence. This one was different. I could feel the gears grinding in his head, the frantic, desperate calculations. He was running through his mental list of contacts, wondering who he could call for a quick $200 bailout, how he could possibly extract himself from this situation without his carefully constructed facade crumbling into dust. Mom, please, he begged, his voice barely a whisper now. Dana is crying. Her mother is asking what kind of family we are. The waiter has already asked us 3 times if everything is okay with the payment. Please. Have mercy. Mercy. Another word that landed with a hollow thud. Where was there mercy when I lay awake at night, my stomach churning as I calculated how to stretch my pension to cover their luxury car payment and my property taxes? Where was there compassion when I told my bridge club I couldn't go on the annual trip because I was a little tight this year? The same week I transferred $3,000 to them for a non-negotiable investment seminar. Mercy is a two-way street, Ryan. And you've been driving the wrong way down it for a decade. Mercy is earned over years, Ryan, I said, my voice cold and clear. And you and Dana lost yours yesterday. I didn't wait for a reply. I simply pressed the end button on my phone. The silence in my kitchen was immediate and profound. My hands were trembling slightly, but it wasn't from fear or regret. It was a pure, adrenaline-fueled tremor of power. I had done it. I had actually hung up on him. I had drawn a line in the sand, and for the first time, I hadn't immediately erased it when he stepped over it. For the next 30 minutes, my phone was a symphony of ignored desperation. It rang again immediately, Ryan, of course. Then Dana. Then a number I didn't recognize, which I assumed was Claudia, Dana's mother. Each time the screen lit up and the ringtone sliced through the silence, I felt a little stronger, a little more convinced of the absolute righteousness of my decision. Every rejected call was a brick I was laying in the wall protecting my newfound peace. I poured myself another coffee, added a splash of the good cream I never used because it was too expensive, and carried it out to my back patio. The morning was beautiful. The birds were chirping, the flowers I had planted myself were blooming, and the sun was warm on my skin. I had missed this. I had missed the simple, uncomplicated pleasure of my own company, in my own space, without the constant, low-grade anxiety of waiting for the next financial SOS. But the calm, I knew, was the eye of the hurricane. The real storm was yet to make landfall. At 11 a.m., right on cue, I heard the familiar, aggressive purr of Ryan's car, the one I'd made the $15,000 down payment on, screech into my driveway. 2 car doors slammed in quick succession, followed by the sound of hurried, angry footsteps marching toward my front door. The knocking started immediately, not a polite tap, but a loud, insistent pounding that shook the old oak door my late husband had chosen with such pride and care. Mom, open the door. We need to talk. No. Ryan's voice was different now. The desperate panic had been burned away, replaced by a layer of aggression, the petulant anger of a child whose favorite toy has been taken away. I didn't move from my patio chair. From my vantage point, I was completely invisible from the front of the house. I took a slow sip of my coffee and watched a blue jay bully the smaller sparrows at the bird feeder. It was funny, I thought, how you could find metaphors for your own life in the most mundane places. Georgia. Now it was Dana's voice, sharp as a shard of glass. We know you're in there. Your car is in the driveway. Stop acting like a child and come out and face us. Face them. As if I were the one who had committed some great crime. As if I were the one who owed a grand apology for disrupting the natural order of their world, where I existed to fund and they existed to spend. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it almost made me laugh out loud. The pounding intensified. It was no longer just fists. I could hear the dull thud of a shoe connecting with the solid wood. My beautiful, sturdy front door was being treated like the entrance to a nightclub. This is ridiculous. Dana shrieked, her voice carrying clearly through the walls and around to the back of the house. You made us look like beggars in front of everyone. My mother had to pay for our lunch. A 70-year-old woman had to dig into her purse because her son-in-law's mother is a lunatic. So that was how the restaurant saga had ended. Claudia had been forced to open her wallet and rescue them. I could picture the scene with vivid, satisfying clarity. Ryan, flushed and sweating as he tried one card after another. Dana making increasingly frantic and pathetic excuses to her mortified mother. The waiter's polite smile becoming a fixed, impatient grimace, and the other diners, those pillars of the society Ryan and Dana so desperately wanted to belong to, watching it all unfold with thinly veiled amusement. The humiliation must have been absolutely exquisite. Mom, please. Ryan's voice was back, bordering on tears again, but this time they were tears of frustrated rage. People were recording it on their phones. This is going to be all over social media. Do you understand that? Social media. Of course. That was the true tragedy here. Not the evisceration of a mother's love, not the profound disrespect, but the potential for a viral moment that would tarnish their carefully curated online personas. It was always about the facade. The knocking stopped abruptly. I could hear the low, furious murmur of an argument taking place just on the other side of my door. They were strategizing. I knew Dana well enough to know that her arsenal of manipulation was deep, and Ryan had been an excellent student over the years. Think about that for a moment. Their biggest fear wasn't losing their mother, it was losing face on the internet. When your child's priority is their Instagram feed over your heart, you know you've crossed into a different kind of battlefield altogether. Georgia. Dana's voice had transformed again. Now it was soft, conciliatory, dripping with a sweetness that was as fake as the designer logo on the purse I'd bought her. I know you're upset, and you have every right to be. Maybe what I said yesterday came out wrong, but you know I didn't mean it like that. I was just joking with my girls. You know how we are when we get together. Sometimes we say things without thinking. It was a chilling performance. The shift from screaming harpy to understanding daughter-in-law was seamless. This was the Dana who could convince me that a $3,000 handbag was an investment piece. Mom? Now Ryan had adopted the gentle tone. The good cop to her good cop. I understand we hurt you. Dana explained everything to me. And you're right to be upset. But canceling the cards like this, it doesn't solve anything. It just makes everything worse for everyone. For everyone. The word echoed in the quiet air. It was never for me. My peace, my financial security, my emotional well-being, they were never part of his calculation of everyone. Please, Mom, he continued, his voice breaking with practiced emotion. We can fix this. We can change. But I need you to reactivate the cards today. Right now. I have bills due. The car insurance is due tomorrow. Dana has doctor's appointments this week. We can't just be left without money out of the blue. Without money. The phrase was so telling. In his mind, my money was their money. The flow was so natural, so assumed, that its interruption felt like a natural disaster, an unexpected and unfair act of God that had left them stranded. They genuinely did not see a distinction between my hard-earned savings and their own disposable income. My bank accounts were simply an extension of their own, a family resource they were entitled to tap at will. Coward. There she was. The real Dana. The mask had slipped completely, revealing the furious, entitled woman beneath. The one who had called me that old woman. The one who had trained my son to see me as a resource. The one who believed that my refusal to be used was an act of cowardice. A fresh, cold wave of resolve washed over me. I stood up from my patio chair, my movements slow and deliberate. I walked through the kitchen and into the living room, my footsteps silent on the rug. I went in the window from which she had shouted. I could see her distorted face pressed close to the glass, her eyes scanning the dim interior. I reached out and pulled the curtain back just enough for our eyes to meet. The change in her expression was instantaneous. The fury melted away into a flash of relief, which then contorted into that familiar, fake, ingratiating smile. "There you are," she exclaimed, as if she had just found a lost puppy. "Come on, honey, open the door. Let's talk about this like a family. We can work it out." I held her gaze. I looked directly into the eyes of the woman who had systematically helped my son monetize his love for me. I felt nothing. No anger, no hurt, no desire for reconciliation. Just a vast, empty stillness. Then, very slowly, without breaking eye contact, I closed the curtain. I heard her shriek of pure, unadulterated frustration from the other side of the glass, followed by a fist pounding against the window pane. But this time, I didn't flinch. I didn't even react. I simply turned and walked back to my patio, to my coffee, to my peace. The shouting and banging continued for another hour, but the heart had gone out of it. It was the sound of a tantrum winding down. From my sanctuary on the patio, I could catch fragments of their furious, whispered conversations. At one point, I heard Dana suggest, "Just call a locksmith. Tell him we're locked out," and Ryan's weary reply, "That's breaking and entering, Dana. We can't do that." Even in their utter desperation, they were still worried about the real-world consequences, about crossing a line that would involve the police and real laws, not just the trampling of a mother's heart. Finally, I heard the car door slam, this time with a defeated finality, and the engine roar to life and fade away down the street. The silence that descended was deeper and more meaningful than the one before. But as I sat there, finally alone, I knew with a cold certainty that this was far from over. I knew Dana. I knew her pride had taken a catastrophic hit. She wouldn't rest. She would already be planning her next move, something more elaborate, more emotionally devastating, more insidious. The war for my money and for my soul had only just begun. The silence after their car pulled away was profound, but it was a different kind of quiet now. It wasn't peaceful. It was the tense, expectant hush before the next wave of the storm. I knew Dana. Her pride had been publicly flogged at the restaurant and then ignored at my doorstep. She wouldn't let this stand. She was already in some corner, sharpening her knives, preparing a more sophisticated attack. The blunt force hadn't worked, so she would switch to surgical strikes. Sure enough, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the siege began anew, but this time it was a digital and telephonic assault. My phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize, but the voice was faintly familiar, polite, firm, and dripping with condescension. "Mrs. Whitlock, this is Claudia, Dana's mother. I hope you're well." She didn't wait for me to answer. "I think there's been a rather significant misunderstanding. Dana has explained the situation to me, and I'm sure we can resolve this like civilized adults. There's no need for this, dramatics." I said nothing. I simply listened, my hand steady around my teacup. "Georgia, dear," she continued, her tone shifting to one of gentle reprimand. "Cutting them off without a word? At a public restaurant? On my birthday, no less. It's rather savage, don't you think? Dana is heartbroken. She looks up to you so much." The lies were so brazen they were almost impressive. I placed the phone back in its cradle without a word. The dial tone buzzed against her ear, my only reply. The next call was from my sister, Elaine, who lives 2 states away. Her voice was laced with concern, the kind that's been carefully planted by a master manipulator. "Georgia? Ryan called me. He's very worried. He says you're acting, strangely. That you left them stranded somewhere and you've canceled all your cards. Are you feeling okay? Do you need me to come down? Maybe you're having one of those senior moments." I felt a cold trickle of betrayal. They were already working the extended family, weaponizing their concern and twisting it into a narrative of my mental decline. "I'm perfectly fine, Elaine," I replied, my voice even. "Better than ever, in fact." "But I don't understand," she pressed. "Ryan says you cut them off without any warning. That doesn't sound like you. You've always been so generous with your family." "Maybe that was the problem," I said. "Georgia, they're your family," she insisted, using the word like a moral cudgel. "Dana says you're punishing them for some silly joke. Surely you can sit down and talk this out. It was just an innocent joke." An innocent joke. In a few short hours, my profound humiliation had been neatly repackaged and sold as my own oversensitivity. It was a masterclass in revisionist history. Elaine, I asked, cutting through the platitudes, have you ever felt like an ATM for your kids? What? No, of course not. Why would you ask that? Because that is precisely what I have become to Ryan and Dana. And yesterday, they laughed about it in my face. Georgia, you're exaggerating, she said, her voice tight with discomfort. Parents help their children. It's normal. Is it normal to pay your adult son's rent for 8 months while he doesn't look for work? Is it normal to finance their luxury vacations while you stay home alone? Is it normal for them to mock you for your generosity? Elaine was quiet for a long moment. Well, maybe they've taken advantage of your kindness a bit. But to cut everything off at once seems so drastic. You'll push them away. You know what's drastic, Elaine? I said, the ice returning to my voice. Working until you're 65 to secure a decent inheritance for your son, only to find out he's already spent more than half of it while you're still alive. The silence on the other end was finally a thoughtful one. I had given her something real to chew on. After that conversation, I'd had enough. I unplugged the landline and put my cell phone on airplane mode. The sudden, absolute silence was a physical relief. I needed the mental space to process, to fortify my defenses. That evening, I cooked myself a proper dinner, a salmon fillet with asparagus, something I would never have made just for myself, always saving the good food for when they might visit. As I ate at my kitchen table, enjoying my own company, I realized the most remarkable thing. I felt no guilt. The heavy, familiar blanket of maternal guilt that had smothered me for a decade was simply gone. In its place was a brilliant, shocking mental clarity. It was as if a fog had lifted. I could see the last 10 years with the sharp, unforgiving lens of hindsight. The cycle was always the same. The manufactured crisis. My initial, weak resistance. The applied emotional pressure. It's just this once, we're desperate. What will people think? My capitulation. Their temporary satisfaction. And then, a few weeks later, the whole dance would begin again. There was never a plan for repayment, never genuine gratitude, and certainly never an invitation to share in the fruits of my own generosity. After dinner, I went to my study, a room that had become little more than a storage area for my financial shame. I pulled out the bank statements from the last 5 years, the period where I had started to keep more meticulous records, perhaps subconsciously knowing this day would come. I sat down with a notepad and a calculator, and I began to add it all up. The figure I arrived at an hour later was so devastating it made the room tilt. $86,000. $86,000 in 5 years. That didn't even include the preceding 5 years, when the handouts had been more sporadic, but still substantial. It was more than half of my entire pension, more than many people earn in 2 years of full-time work. But the number itself wasn't the most painful part. It was the cold, hard evidence of the exchange. For $86,000, I had received mockery, indifference, and the status of a useful obligation. And then I found it. The final, insulting twist of the knife. As I scrolled through the line items on one of the now-canceled credit card statements, I saw the recurring charges. The premium streaming services I didn't use. The expensive gym memberships for a gym I'd never set foot in. The monthly subscriptions to high-end fashion magazines addressed to Dana. Small, automatic drains on my account, adding up to hundreds of dollars every month, funding luxuries they enjoyed without a second thought, paid for by a woman who clipped coupons for her grocery shopping. That's the moment you realize it's not just about the big checks for cars and rent. It's the death by 1,000 paper cuts, the small, monthly subscriptions, the automatic drafts they never think about, the quiet, constant bleeding of your resources for their trivial comforts. That's when the anger turns into something colder, something more determined. That night, I made the most important decision of my new life. I went to my filing cabinet and pulled out the single most important document inside, my last will and testament. I had drafted it 5 years ago, in a time of naive hope, believing I was securing the future of a loving, grateful family. Ryan was the sole beneficiary of everything. The house, the savings, the investments. Everything I had worked for my entire life, everything Henry and I had built together, was destined for him. I read it now with new eyes. Why? Why should I leave my entire estate to someone who had already consumed more than half of it while I was still breathing? Why reward a lifetime of financial and emotional exploitation with the biggest payday of all? I decided then and there that first thing in the morning, I would call my lawyer. It was time to make significant changes. If Ryan wanted to treat me like a bank, then he could be content with the interest, not the principal. I went to bed that night with a strange, liberating feeling in my chest. For the first time in years, I had made a decision based entirely on my own well-being, my own sense of justice. I slept a deep, dreamless sleep, and when I woke the next morning, I felt an energy I hadn't possessed in a decade. My first act was to plug the house phone back in. As expected, the answering machine blinked with a frantic red light, 14 new messages. I pressed play and listened to them while I made my coffee, and each one only solidified my resolve. Message 1 was Dana, her voice a masterpiece of tearful performance. Georgia, it's Dana. I know you're upset, but please think about what you're doing. Ryan didn't sleep at all last night. He's so worried about you. He says he's never seen you act like this. Please call us. Message 2 was Ryan, the desperation back in full force. Mom, I went to the bank this morning. They told me you closed the joint savings account. Why would you do that? That money was for our emergencies. The sense of entitlement, the sheer disbelief that I would touch our money, was breathtaking. Message 3 was Elaine again, sounding more uncertain. Georgia. Ryan called again. He says you closed a savings account too. Are you sure you know what you're doing? This seems so radical. The messages continued in this vein, feigned concern, veiled accusations, and emotional blackmail. But message number 11 made me stop cold. It was from a number I didn't recognize, but the voice was a deep, patronizing baritone I vaguely recognized as Oscar, Dana's brother-in-law. Mrs. Whitlock, this is Oscar. We met at the Christmas party a couple years back. Listen, Dana asked me to give you a call. She's real worried, says you're acting out of character. Now, I'm just a simple man, but it seems to me sometimes you womenfolk can complicate things more than they need to be. Why don't you just be the bigger person and let bygones be bygones? Family is family. Family is family. The ultimate guilt trip, delivered by a hired moralizer. I wondered if family would pay Oscar's mortgage if he decided to quit his job. At 9 a.m. sharp, I called my lawyer's office. The secretary, recognizing the urgency in my voice, told me Mr. Coleman had a cancellation and could see me at 2 p.m. that afternoon. Perfect. Next, I called the bank and made an appointment with the branch manager to implement additional security measures, ensuring Ryan had no access whatsoever to my financial information. As I was getting ready to leave, the doorbell rang. For a moment, my heart clenched, expecting another confrontation. But when I looked through the peephole, I saw my neighbor, Lucy, standing there, her face etched with genuine concern. "Good morning, Georgia," she said when I opened the door. "I hope I'm not intruding, but I heard, well, quite a lot of noise yesterday. I wanted to make sure you were all right." I invited her in, the simple, kind gesture feeling like a lifeline. I poured her a coffee and we sat at the kitchen table. I told her everything. Not just the events of the last 2 days, but the slow, soul-crushing erosion of the last 10 years. Lucy listened, her intelligent eyes never leaving my face. When I finished, she placed her hand over mine. "Georgia," she said softly, "I have to confess something. For years, I've watched them come and go. I've seen the new cars, the designer shopping bags, the latest phones. And I've watched you, still driving your 10-year-old sedan, still shopping at the discount grocer. It never sat right with me." Her words were an external validation I didn't know I needed. Someone else had seen it. The disparity had been visible from the outside all along. "But you know what struck me the most?" she continued. "I have never, not once, seen them do anything for you. I've never seen Ryan help you with your groceries or fix a loose shutter. I've never seen them visit without an agenda. It was always take, take, take. Is it that obvious?" I asked, a flush of shame warming my cheeks. To someone on the outside, yes, she said gently. "But I understand why you couldn't see it. A mother's heart always wants to believe the best of her children. We talked for over an hour. She told me about her own struggles with adult children who felt entitled to her time and money after her husband died, and how she had to learn to set hard boundaries. "You know what helped me the most?" she said as she got up to leave. "Realizing that being a good mother doesn't mean being a martyr. You can love your children with all your heart without letting them sacrifice your dignity on the altar of their convenience." Her words echoed in my mind all the way to the bank. In the manager's sterile office, we reviewed every account. I changed all passwords, added two-factor authentication, and placed extra security flags on my profile. Mrs. Whitlock, the manager, a kind-faced man in his 50s, asked cautiously, "May I ask the reason for these rather drastic changes? Any specific security concerns?" I looked him directly in the eye. "Let's just say I've realized that the biggest threat to my financial security has been living in my own family." He nodded, a look of profound understanding on his face. "It's more common than you'd think, ma'am. We see it all too often. You are doing the right thing by protecting yourself." After the bank, I did something for myself. I went to a small, charming bistro I had always wanted to try, but had never allowed myself the extravagance. I ordered the most expensive dish on the menu, a glass of crisp white wine, and for the first time in years, I did not calculate the cost. The bill came to $45, less than Ryan and Dana would casually spend on appetizers. As I savored the last bite of my flourless chocolate cake, I realized I was enjoying a meal without the underlying acid of anxiety for the first time in a decade. I was rediscovering my own appetite, both for food and for life. The appointment with Mr. Coleman, my lawyer, was more than just a meeting. It was a declaration of independence. The wood-paneled office felt like a courtroom where I was both judge and plaintiff. "Mrs. Whitlock," he said, steepling his fingers as he reviewed my current will. "I see we drafted this 5 years ago. You designated your entire estate to your son, Ryan. Given your call, I assume you wish to make significant changes." "Completely sure," I replied, my voice not wavering for a second. "Over these past 5 years, I've witnessed my son's true character. He has shown he doesn't value my generosity, and frankly, he has already spent more than half of what would have been his inheritance while I'm still alive." Mr. Coleman listened intently as I detailed the $86,000 I had documented. His eyebrows raised slightly at the figure, a professional mask slipping for just a moment to reveal human surprise. "I understand your position entirely," he said, making a note. "What kind of changes are you considering?" "I want to divide my estate," I began, the plan forming with crystal clarity as I spoke. "A significant portion will go to charitable organizations that help people with genuine need, not capricious adults. Another portion will go to my sister, Elaine, who has always been independent and never once treated me like a wallet." I took a breath. "And for Ryan, I want him to receive just enough to show I haven't disinherited him out of pure malice, but not enough for him to continue living without working." "Are you thinking of a specific percentage structure?" he asked. 50% for charity, 30% for my sister, and 20% for Ryan, I said, but with a critical condition. He can only receive his share after demonstrating one full, consecutive year of complete financial independence. No loans from me, no gifts over a nominal amount. He needs to prove he can stand on his own 2 feet. Mr. Coleman allowed a small, approving smile. "That conditional clause is not only interesting, Mrs. Whitlock, it's completely legally sound. You're essentially incentivizing long-term personal responsibility. It's a very intelligent structure." I left the law firm feeling a weight I hadn't even known I was carrying lift from my shoulders. For the first time, I was planning my future based on my values, not my fears. My legacy would now reward maturity and punish entitlement. It was the ultimate boundary. But when I arrived home, the universe seemed determined to test my newfound resolve. There was an unfamiliar, expensive car in my driveway. Standing on my porch, her posture rigid with judgment, was Dana's mother, Claudia. "Georgia," she said, turning with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "There you are. Good. We need to have a woman-to-woman talk." I invited her in, more out of a sense of morbid curiosity than hospitality. I wanted to hear what fabricated version of events had been delivered to her. Look, dear, Claudia began, settling into my armchair as if holding court. I know there was a little misunderstanding yesterday between you and the kids. Dana told me everything, and frankly, I think you're exaggerating the situation. Exaggerating? I asked, my voice neutral. Well, yes, she said, waving a dismissive hand. Dana says she made a little comment that you misinterpreted, and now you've taken these drastic measures. Canceling your own son's credit cards? It seems a very extreme reaction to a simple joke between women. A simple joke between women. The narrative had been perfectly sanitized for her consumption. My humiliation was now my failure to take a joke. Claudia, I said, my tone still calm. Do you give your daughter unlimited access to your credit cards? Well, no, but... Do you pay your adult daughter's rent for months on end? No, but that's... Do you finance their luxury vacations while you stay home alone? Claudia shifted uncomfortably, her composure cracking slightly. Georgia, every family handles their finances differently. Exactly, I said. And I've decided to handle mine differently from now on. But think about Dana and Ryan, she implored, switching to a tone of maternal concern. They're young. They're building their future. They need support. They are 35 and 32 years old, I stated flatly. At their age, I had raised a son, worked for decades, and saved for my retirement without a cent from my parents. Times were different then, she insisted. Times are different, I agreed. Now there are more opportunities, better education, easier access to loans. There is no reason to educated, able-bodied adults cannot support themselves. Claudia's mask slipped completely. Her voice took on a harder edge. Georgia, Dana is devastated. She cried all night. She says she's always seen you as a second mother and doesn't understand why you're suddenly rejecting her. A second mother who is only good for paying bills, according to her own words. That was a joke, she snapped, her patience fraying. Women always complain about their mothers-in-law. It's normal. Complaining in private is one thing, Claudia. Public humiliation is another. The conversation spiraled for another 20 minutes. She cycled through guilt, think of your son, fear, you'll die alone, and shame, what will all your friends think? When none of it worked, she finally played her last card. Her voice dropped, becoming low and threatening. Georgia, I'm going to be frank with you. Dana and Ryan are considering seeking legal help. There are avenues to have a person declared mentally incompetent if they show erratic behavior with their finances. There it was. The nuclear option. The ultimate manipulation. If I wouldn't give them my money willingly, they would try to have a court strip me of the right to control it myself. I stood up, my entire body cold with a rage so pure it was almost peaceful. Claudia, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. I suggest you consult with a very good lawyer before you try that. I just came from an appointment with mine. He assured me that a person who takes steps to protect their finances from familial exploitation is demonstrating sound mental competence, not the opposite. Her face went pale. She realized she had revealed their hand too early. I didn't mean. She began to backtrack. Yes, you did, I interrupted. And now that I know your true intentions, I believe this conversation is over. I walked her to the door in a silence so thick you could taste it. As she stepped out, she turned. One last attempt. Georgia, I hope you reconsider. A family war benefits no one. There is no war, Claudia, I said, closing the door. There is only a woman who has finally learned to value herself. After she left, I sat in the growing dusk, my heart pounding. It wasn't with fear, but with a fierce, burning determination. They weren't just trying to guilt me, they were threatening to have me declared a lunatic for wanting to keep what was mine. That evening, I called Mr. Coleman and relayed Claudia's threat. He was reassuring but firm. The bar for declaring someone incompetent is very high, Georgia. It requires extensive medical evidence and a lengthy legal process. However, he cautioned, I would recommend you document everything. Keep a record of these threats. If you can, record conversations. And for your own peace of mind, consider getting a preventative psychological evaluation. It's the best defense against such a baseless claim. That night, the fear tried to creep in. But it was smothered by something stronger, a cold, clear-eyed resolve. They had shown me the bottom of the abyss they were willing to push me into. And I decided I would not fall. The next day, a Saturday, I followed my lawyer's advice to the letter. I went to a private clinic and underwent a comprehensive psychological evaluation. The doctor, a sharp woman in her 50s, listened to my story. After 2 hours of tests and interviews, she looked at me, her expression one of respect. "Mrs. Whitlock, let me be perfectly clear. You are demonstrating exceptional mental lucidity. Recognizing long-term patterns of financial abuse, setting firm, healthy boundaries, and taking proactive steps to protect your resources are all signs of a completely competent mind. In fact, I would argue you are acting more rationally now than you were when you were permitting the abuse to continue." She handed me an official, sealed report stating I was of sound mind. It was my shield, my insurance policy. When I returned home, Lucy was in her garden. "Georgia," she called out, coming to the fence. "An older woman, very well dressed, came by yesterday asking about you. Wanted to know if you'd been acting strangely. I told her you seemed happier and more relaxed than I'd ever seen you. I told her about Claudia's visit and the threat." Lucy's face hardened with indignation. "That is unbelievable," she fumed. "Trying to have you declared incompetent for not handing over your money? It's the most grotesque thing I've ever heard." "It just proves how entitled they feel to it," I said. "They don't see it as my life's work. They see it as their pre-inheritance, and I'm inconveniently still using it. You know what you need, Georgia?" Lucy said, her eyes lighting up with a mischievous glint. "You need to get out of here. You need to do something decadent, just for you. When was the last time you did something purely for pleasure?" The question stumped me. I couldn't remember. "There's a 5-day Caribbean cruise leaving next Wednesday," she continued. "I was supposed to go with my sister, but she had to cancel. Don't let me go alone. It's all booked and paid for. You just need to say yes." The idea was terrifying and thrilling in equal measure. A cruise? When was the last time I'd traveled for fun? When had I slept in a bed I hadn't made myself, eaten a meal I hadn't cooked? I looked at Lucy's hopeful face, and I thought of Ryan and Dana and Claudia's threat and the $86,000. I thought of my life, my one precious life. "I would love to," I said, and I meant it. That afternoon, we finalized the plans. $1,500 for 5 days of all-inclusive freedom. A fraction of what I'd spent on their last vacation. But this time, it was for me. That's the turning point, isn't it? When you stop spending your life's energy on people who drain you, and you start investing it in yourself. That first yes to your own happiness is the most powerful word you'll ever say. Sunday morning, as I was mentally packing for the cruise, the doorbell rang. It was Ryan alone. He looked awful, haunted, with deep shadows under his eyes. He'd lost the arrogant posture. "Mom," he said, his voice raw. "Please, can we talk? Just you and me. No Dana, no shouting. Please." I let him in, but I kept my emotional distance. I was learning to recognize the subtle flavors of manipulation, and I was on high alert. "Mom, I'm desperate," he began, slumping onto the sofa. "The car insurance is due Monday. I don't have the money. If I don't pay it, I can't drive to work." "How much is it?" I asked, my tone that of a bank manager assessing a risky loan. $250. "And how much did you and Dana earn last month?" "About $3,500, he mumbled. "And where does it all go, Ryan?" I asked, not unkindly, but with unwavering directness. "The rent, the utilities, the food, and then what?" "How much did you spend last month on restaurants? On streaming services? On food delivery?" Those are just normal living expenses," he said, frustration creeping in. "Are they?" I asked. "Ryan, you're 35 years old. You have a college degree. Why can't you pay a $250 bill?" "Because there's never anything left," he exploded, then deflated just as quickly. "It just goes." "Then you need to make different choices," I said simply. "You are living a life you cannot afford. The only reason you've managed it for this long is because I was subsidizing it. That subsidy is over." He was quiet for a long time, staring at his hands. "Mom," he finally said, his voice softer, broken. "What can I do? How do I fix this?" "You can start," I said, by figuring out how to pay for your own car insurance. He sat in my living room for almost an hour after that. We didn't speak much, but I could see the gears turning, not in the frantic way of before, but in a slower, more painful process of genuine reflection. When he left, he didn't ask for money. He just said, "I'll find a way, Mom. And we need to talk." A real talk. It was a small thing, but it was the first step he'd ever taken on his own. On Monday, I got a text from Ryan. "Mom, got a small personal loan to cover the insurance. Found a cheaper apartment. We're moving next month. Wanted you to know." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a reconciliation. But it was an action. And for the first time in a decade, it was an action he had taken for himself. That night, I slept the deep, untroubled sleep of the truly free. The next day, I would leave for the cruise. I was no longer just Georgia, the mother, the ATM. I was becoming Georgia, the woman. And I was ready to meet her. I'm back. And those 5 days at sea were more than a vacation. They were a rebirth. For the first time in a decade, I woke up when I wanted, ate what I craved, and laughed without a single, silent calculation running in the back of my mind. Lucy was the perfect companion, free of drama, full of life. I met other women, too, women like Isabel and Eleanor, who had their own versions of my story. We were a sisterhood of reclaimed lives, watching the sunset from the deck and talking not about our children's problems, but about our own dreams. When I returned home, a different kind of peace awaited me. There were messages on my machine, but none were the desperate, demanding cries I was used to. Ryan had called twice, just to see if I got home safely. Dana had left a short, simple message. "I hope you had a good cruise. We'd love to hear about it when you have time." The shift in tone was subtle but seismic. The siege had lifted. A few days later, Ryan came over. This time, he didn't ring the bell with aggression or desperation. He sat in his car for a few minutes, gathering himself. When he came in, he looked different. Thinner, maybe, but also more solid. "Mom," he began, "we moved into the new apartment. It's smaller. The neighborhood isn't as fancy. But I can sleep at night. I'm not lying awake wondering how we're going to make it to the next paycheck, because for the first time, the paycheck is enough." He told me they had canceled the extravagant gym memberships, the premium streaming services, the countless little luxuries they'd considered necessities. And Dana, he said, a note of pride in his voice, she got a part-time job on weekends. It was her idea. She said she wanted to contribute, not just manage money that came from somewhere else. Then he did something he hadn't done since he was a little boy. He looked me directly in the eyes, his own filled with a painful, hard-won clarity. "Mom, I'm sorry. Not just for the restaurant or for the cards. For all of it. For all the years. I never saw you. I only saw what you could do for us. I was a terrible son." The words hung in the air, not as a manipulation, but as a simple, devastating confession. "What changed?" I asked softly. "When we had to make that first budget with just our salaries," he said, his voice thick. "I saw the truth on paper. We were spending double what we made. Double. And you were the one bridging that impossible gap. I was carrying the weight of knowing I was a fraud, living a lie that you were financing. Letting that go, it's terrifying, but it's freedom." We talked for a long time. It was the first real conversation we'd had as two adults in over a decade. Before he left, he asked the most important question. "Mom, do you think, is there any way we can start over? Can I ever be your son who visits just because I love you, not because I need something?" My heart, which I had thought had turned to stone, cracked open just a little. "That relationship can start today, Ryan, if you want it to. I've always wanted a son who loved me for me." "Then how about we come for lunch on Sunday?" he asked, hope tentative in his eyes. "We'll bring the food. We'll cook. We'll just be together." "I would like that very much," I said. After he left, I called Mr. Coleman. The vengeful will I had drafted felt hollow now. I didn't want to punish a ghost. I wanted to reward growth. We redesigned it together. It became a tiered will, one that reflected hope, not bitterness. If Ryan could maintain his financial independence and demonstrate genuine maturity for 2 consecutive years, his share would increase. If he could sustain it for 5, it would increase again. It was a will that believed in the possibility of change. The lunch on Sunday was awkward, quiet, but it was real. Dana was polite, humble even. She helped in the kitchen without being asked. Ryan didn't once glance at his phone. We talked about my cruise, about their new apartment, about everything except money. It was a foundation. Fragile, but real. I sit here now in the quiet of my home, and I finally understand. This wasn't a story about winning a war against my family. It was about ending my own war with myself. The war between my desire to be a good mother and my need to be a respected person. I had to tear down the bank of mom to build a bridge back to my son. It may never be the relationship I once dreamed of, but it has the potential to be something truer, something built on mutual respect instead of financial dependency. I learned that no is not a dirty word. It is the foundation of yes. Saying no to their demands allowed me to say yes to my own life. It allowed the possibility for them to finally say yes to their own adulthood. It took me 68 years to learn that my generosity should be a gift, not an entitlement. That my love is infinite, but my money is not. And that is a lesson I will never, ever forget. Georgia smiles, a serene, powerful smile, directly at the camera. So, I leave you with this question. Where in your life do you need to build a boundary to save a relationship? Where do you need to say no so you can finally mean yes? I'd really love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, if it gave you a little courage, then like this video and subscribe to my channel. There are many more stories of courage and change waiting for you. Big hugs, and I'll see you next time.